Smite is a multiplayer online battle arena. The playable gods in Smite are gods from different pantheons, including Hindu, Chinese, Japanese, Mayan, Norse, Greek, and Roman. As you can see, many of the gods in Smite are female. These gods are heavily researched and created based on their lore. As you may notice, some of these gods seem to be partially underdressed. And recently, Hi-Rez Studios, the creators of Smite, have received complaints about how these female gods are portrayed. The goal of our study here is to figure out, are these gods being portrayed in a pornographic way, or are these gods actually being portrayed accurate to their lore? In order to do this, we will have to dive deeper into their lore and look at the artist's capture of those gods and see, are these accurate or are they pornified? To do this, we will look at the god that has received the most protests since she was created, the Hindu god of destruction, Kali. In 2012, Smite went under fire by members of the Hindu community in regards to Kali. For a devout Hindu, the visual image of one of their gods is sacred and revered. To see it casually used for entertainment is an act of disrespect to them, and for their religion. The Hindu community assumed that Hi-Rez wanted to use Kali to get the younger male demographic of the gaming community. They stated that Kali was pornified, and heavily protested the game. Even with all this Hindu protest against the goddess Kali, Hi-Rez stood behind their depiction of Kali, at first. Eventually they remodeled Kali in the way that you would see her if you played the game today. But the question is, was this change actually a benefit for the Hindu community and Kali's portrayal? As you can see, Hi-Rez decided to cover up more of her, assets. They also took away the 2 heads she was carrying and now have replaced them with small swords. They even went as far as to replace her actual abilities in the game, thus distancing Kali even more from her true lore. Kali is the Hindu god of destruction. She's supposed to be associated with death, violence, sexuality, and motherly love. Whoa! This depiction of Kali is much more revealing than Hi-Rez's. Here, Kali is actually shown wearing less than Hi-Rez ever depicted her as. But then again, they can't go around showing gods naked, can they? Let's look at some other gods, such as the Egyptian goddess Neith. As we can see, Neith is accurately portrayed to her lore and is still more covered up than she would traditionally be. Back in that time, it was just common for women to walk around topless. Hi-Rez takes this information and builds it into a model that they can use in a game. Let's look at the goddess Aphrodite, clearly the most pornified god in the game. Or is she? As you can see throughout history, Aphrodite has been shown wearing nothing at all. I mean, she is the goddess of love after all, and the human form is not something that should be hidden away. It should be something that is seen as beautiful and artistic, and I believe that is a way that Smite has been trying to portray these goddesses. With that in mind, which depiction is better? The depiction of Kali that's extremely accurate to her lore, or the depiction of Kali that was changed and does not seem to really fit her persona at all as a god? Before we're so quick to judge and jump and see our games ruining the depiction of the things we love, we should probably take a firm, hard look at the things we love and see how they're already being depicted in the real world. It's a difficult thing to do, but if we don't do it, we end up causing the same thing we were trying to prevent in the first place. But hey, this is only one example. Let's look at more. Let's take a look at the game Tomb Raider. Lara Croft has been the center of focus of sexual representation of women since 1998. This is a long-running series, and there are a lot of depictions of Lara Croft that we can look at. But first, let's look at the current model. Games today have the possibility to be very realistic, and Tomb Raider is no exception. Currently, we can get people in-game to be almost as real as life itself. You can see this by observing Lara Croft's model. But this wasn't always the case. In the past, game engines could barely function at all, let alone have high-density models and extremely large textures. They had to make do with what they could. This means that to get the characters to the shape they wanted, they had to push the extremes of their bodies in order to make them look like they had a gender at all. The original Lara Croft had to be pushed to that extreme. Now, as the versions kept getting more recent and recent, you start to realize that this model is becoming more realistic. Now, the creators of Tomb Raider have stated that originally they did use Lara Croft for the sex appeal of the genre, but now they're currently trying to strive more for a realistic and believable character. And as the versions continue, you can start to see that more and more. Currently, a lot of games are using scan data, which is scanning somebody in real life and putting them in a game. Obviously, these early versions of Lara Croft do not have that technological capability. But as you can see, each time that Lara Croft gets recreated, she becomes a little bit more real. She seems like she's starting to fit more of what the ideal female would look like. Now, I say ideal because that is the intent of Lara Croft. Just as in movies, the player wants to associate themselves with a character they idolize. Lara Croft is not only beautiful, but is also seen as strong and independent. The most recent depiction of Lara Croft was also animated with motion capture. This means that a real live-action female was running as her run animation, jumping as her jump animation, and swimming as her swim. It's hard to argue that the artists are making this a little bit too feminized when it's a real female actually creating the motion. You may argue that the current Lara Croft is still an unrealistic depiction of the female form, but you have to realize the Lara Croft we see today is actually just scan data of Angelina Jolie. Now, obviously, not every woman is Angelina Jolie, but just as in movies, this is a person we idolize. Let's look at another example of growth in video games when it comes to female representation. This example is Sonya from Mortal Kombat. Sonya's first depiction in Mortal Kombat was very dainty. I mean, she literally kisses someone to death. I mean, come on. But in the next depiction we see of her, she is more revealed, but seems to be a little bit more aggressive and hands-on with her battle tactics. Wait a minute. We're still not there, are we? As you can see, Mortal Kombat 9's version of Sonya is very pornographic and exaggerated, nowhere close to the female form. But in Mortal Kombat X, we start to see a change in that. She's more covered up and looks much more like a covert op agent than she does like a stripper. On top of that, why are we not even talking about the violence in these games? I mean, take Melina for example. You see this clip, you see her tearing apart a person's stomach, and yet people are riled up about the cleavage? I mean, that just seems more like misplaced priorities. Now, obviously, female exaggeration in games is something that's never going to end. And I'm not saying that it should. Males and females both get exaggerated in games. But don't let exaggerated characters such as these make you believe that all games are doing this, or that no one is striving for a fair, beautiful representation.
I'll find you, my love. I promise.